This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Mike Sedita.
Hello and welcome to the Good Neighbor Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Sedita. Today we are joined by, and I don't want to butcher the name because I'm terrible with names, Kevin Zwich. Am I saying it right?
Very good.
Excellent. Everybody messes up my name. You wouldn't think it's that difficult, but Sedita comes out 1,000 different ways, so I try to make sure I get it correctly. Kevin Zwich is the partner with Brick Business Law. Kevin, how you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the Good Neighbor Podcast. Just so you're aware of what we do, why we do what we do, the Good Neighbor Podcast was started during COVID as a way for business owners and philanthropic groups to get their message out to the community while remaining socially distant. Because you and I are not in the same location, we're doing this remotely. It gives us the ability to get that information and disseminate it out to the masses through our platform. And over the last 4 years, the Good Neighbor Podcast is a national brand. We're in Denver, Atlanta, Virginia, Philadelphia, all over the place. I'm lucky enough to be the person here in Tampa that gets to speak to business owners and professionals like you. So with that said, tell us a little bit about Brick Business Law.
Oh, thanks, Mike. Well, Brick Business Law is a small law firm, and we serve like Florida businesses, small to medium-sized businesses, entrepreneurs, professionals, and individuals. So we're not a big law firm, but we're a very dynamic law firm. It was formed in 2015 by Kevin Brick, and then the firm really focuses now across Florida, but we have offices in the Tampa Bay area. And the things that I think set us apart is, first of all, our vision is to provide consistent, excellent professional services and thoughtful and compassionate. So we want to be excellent lawyers, but we also want to be compassionate lawyers and thoughtful lawyers and approach it in that way. So we believe that, sort of sets us apart a little bit. We cover really all kinds of business issues. I'm an employment attorney, and we handle business litigation, business compliance, licensing, all kinds of business matters. And in those instances where we don't necessarily have the expertise in-house, we have relationships with other law firms and lawyers that have that specialist expertise. So we can refer clients out or get client service through other attorneys that we associate with.
So you said a lot there. So let me ask you, first question, Kevin started the firm in 2015. How many partners are there at this point?
Well, we have, I think we have about 9 attorneys now, and probably about half of them are partners. And we're in the process of trying to expand. Like, I just joined the firm at the end of 2023, and I'm a 32-year employment attorney, been practicing in Florida for 32 years. And I'm helping the firm build an employment law practice and expand our employment law capabilities. So our focus is really on business litigation with small to medium-sized businesses, and really the full gamut of that, and also on corporate general counsel type work. So we act as general counsel or outside general counsel, to a lot of firms that don't have in-house lawyers in many cases, those companies. And we can be available to handle any kind of legal issue that comes up on a general counsel basis. And we also do a lot of corporate work in terms of corporate formation, corporate management, corporate organizational structure, with stocks, issuing stock and executive agreements and things of that nature. So we really cover the full gamut, and our focus is on the small to medium-sized businesses.
So does it work two different ways? I mean, again, I'm making assumptions. I'm just a podcast host and marketing person, so I wouldn't necessarily know the specifics. But if I'm saying something out of turn, you could tell me. Are most of your clients fall into one of two categories? Either A, they keep you guys on like a retainer, and then when they need your services, you work off at your hourly rate, or is the other bucket really someone comes to you and says, hey, me and my buddy are going into business to set up this firm. We need proper documentation, partnership agreements, buy-sell agreements, things like that, and they pay you for like a contract. Like, what the work's going to be, and you charge them a certain amount, or is everything straight hourly?
No, that's a good question, and it's really both. It's kind of all of the above. Like,
Okay.
for example, we have a fixed charge that we charge businesses to set up their corporate structure, to get them incorporated and all that. And then if depending on the business, like some have more elaborate operating agreements the shareholders have to enter into or the partners have to enter into. So we help them set it up, but ideally set it up in a way that can protect everyone going forward. Because another aspect that we handle in litigation is sometimes what are called business divorces or partnership disputes. And we do handle those cases and I do that, and so does my firm. And I can tell you, in many instances, individuals and businesses would be better served, had they had some of that stuff worked out in advance. A lot of times they come into those problems and they don't have it all agreed to in advance, and it becomes more difficult. So we can handle both the in advance part, which is probably the preferred way to do it, but we can also represent, companies to get back up to speed, or if they're in litigation with partners or there's a partnership dispute.
I would think if you guys are handling it on the front end, most of your partnership agreements have a dissolution of the entity clause in them, right? I mean, that's kind of standard operating procedure.
I think that's a pretty good assumption. Yes. I mean, I liken it to sort of a prenuptial agreement, which many people have heard about in the marital context. And I would say I'm not a marital lawyer, but it's much more important in my view in the business context, because yes, it's all mapped out in advance. So if there is a dispute or if there is a need to split up or do something different, that's governed, and it can be done a lot less expensively and with a lot less contention in those instances. And that's obviously preferred.
I'll tell you, I've been divorced twice in matrimony, and both of those divorces combined were less painful than splitting up a partnership agreement from a partner that I previously had. Just because, the marriage there's marital assets and all that stuff, but the business, the amount of income through the business was way greater than either of my two marriages, and when that amount of money is involved, it becomes much more contentious. Every little thing is scrutinized, and we did have very good documentation in our partnership agreement and dissolution of everything. So I can't imagine how down and dirty it would get when nobody has that stuff.
Well, the problem is this. I mean, like if you're starting a business and you got a partner or a couple partners, the last thing you really want to do up front when you're trying to build the business is give a bunch of money to an attorney. I mean, that's
right.
To draft up documents. But I can tell you from direct experience that, the folks that do that and make that investment, if there's an issue down the road, they'll save bundles times that amount of money by not getting into a dispute or not having to litigate or not having to fight over it. So I think, and I think where we come in, my firm is, we can handle the litigation, but and the corporate formation and the corporate structure work. But, we also guide clients as they go through business in our general counsel role. So as they're going through business, they have licensing agreements, if they have vendor agreements to look at, if they have non-compete or restrictive covenant agreements with employees, wage and hour compliance. So we can help with our general counsel engagements. We're kind of the lawyer on call when they need something done, and we can either do it ourselves in-house or we have other attorneys that specialize outside of our firm that we can refer to.
Well, you're absolutely right. Like for my last partnership, in the beginning when we were working out of my partner's basement, there wasn't a lot of money for us to even have to worry about. It was kind of like, look, let's hit the ground running. Let's get things started. Once we get to a certain point, and we did, we got to a certain point where we were making enough where we said, hey, look, maybe now's the time we institute all this stuff, which we did. If we had a generic, like online legal document that we put together on our own, but when the stakes got higher, it was important for us to actually hire somebody to do is worth the investment for sure. The thing from your standpoint though, like I'm thinking about like Sunbiz, for example. I would think a bunch of your people, maybe not, maybe people are a little bit more versed in this, and I don't want to go behind the curtain too deeply, but to set up a business on Sunbiz really isn't that difficult. It's pretty straightforward to do that part of it when it's like a sole proprietorship. But if someone comes to you and says, hey, me and my brother-in-law want to go into business, they're coming to you, you take them through from the like give us the name of your entity, you do the search, you make sure it's available, you set up everything, you set up the management structure all within Sunbiz. That's part of the service you guys provide from like minute one, second one, correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm assuming, I mean, the business world is so vast. I mean, do you work a lot with, say, like business broker guys that are helping people buy and sell businesses? Like, do you have relationships with some of those guys so that when they're selling a franchise or a business to somebody else, they say, hey, look, you guys need to contact Kevin because he'll help you through the process? Do you get a lot of referrals that way?
Yeah, I think we do get referrals from other organizations, and then we're also able to refer, our clients, to other professional organizations that they may need assistance from, because we have relationships with, like if they want to sell their business, we may have a business broker we could refer them to or recommend them to them. So yes, there is a lot of that, and I think it, the cost comparisons, with a business dispute with a partner, if it gets into litigation, each partner could be spending, way up to even into the six figures in terms of legal fees and all that. So, so it's really, and it's the same thing like in the employment area where I practice, I always, encourage my clients to be proactive and get out ahead of the curve because, in terms of how they're handling their employment practices and compliance and making sure they're in compliance, because it's much easier to avoid a problem, before it becomes a problem.
And you're setting up the structure. So I own a corp or an S corp or whatever I own, and I have 10 employees. You're handling all of the legalities to staffing those people, to making sure I have the right workman's comp, like all the different things. Is that part of what you guys do, all that corporate stuff?
Yes, it is. And that's particularly what I do, and because I'm an employment attorney, and we'll walk clients through that. But yes, I mean, like, for example, the federal law, Fair Labor Standards Act, which governs minimum wage, overtime pay, things of that nature, that applies to every employer, even if you just have one employee. A lot of the discrimination laws that prohibit discrimination in the workplace, the state and federal ones kick in usually at a minimum of 15 employees. The Family and Medical Leave Act, which mandates unpaid leave, kicks in at 50 employees. So even small employers can get caught up pretty quickly in a lot of the legal compliance requirements that come under the employment laws, and that's where I help them. For example, we recently had changes in the Department of Labor. They changed the minimum salary that you need to pay someone in order to qualify for the white collar overtime exemptions. That's going up to like $41,000 in July and to like $55,000 in January. And so that's going to affect, who's exempt, who's non-exempt, and that's going to require, some action by employers, regardless of whether they're our client or not. That all employers are going to have to address that.
So let me ask you a question on that. So if it's, you said 41 to 55, would you anticipate, again, I'm just kind of guessing here, like if I have someone that's making, they're already making 41, I'm trying to think, like, you're going to have some people that are thinking about it going, look, I'd rather just bump their salary up to 55,000 and not pay them overtime than keep them in limbo where I still have to pay them for their hourly rate. I'm assuming you're going to see a lot of that.
Yes, I think that's a choice that employers are going to have to make if they want to keep the exemption, and then they're going to have to increase the salary level to meet the salary test, or they could convert the employee back to non-exempt and start keeping track of work hours and paying overtime in that as well. So that that's another option. But those are big changes because the current level for the salary test is $35,000. So in January, basically 6 months from now, it's going up $20,000 a year.
Yeah, it's a tough one. All right, that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's a big jump.
So let me ask you this then. Another question that I'm assuming you run into with employment law. What are the rules for non-competes in the state of Florida? So like if I went to work for another company, is there true? Because I think when I lived in Georgia, if I remember correctly, they wasn't really a way to enforce a non-compete. If I remember correctly, I might be wrong. What is the rules in that? Like people can actually enforce it and prevent somebody from working and making a living if they get a job?
Well, yes and yes, but I got to caveat that a little bit because there's a new Federal Trade Commission rule that came out that affects non-competes. But and then quickly to your comment about Georgia, one of my former partners practiced in Georgia, and Georgia since then has had a statute be put into place regarding non-competes. But in Florida, there's a statute that's been in place since 1992 that governs non-competes. One of my former law partners was actually involved in preparing that statute back in the early 90s when I was in law school. So that Florida has it. But recently, the Federal Trade Commission at the federal level came out with a new rule that's going to be effective in September. There's a blog on my firm's website if anyone wants to check out my blog on that. But essentially, the new Federal Trade Commission rule is going to outlaw non-compete agreements across the country. And so that'll affect the Florida statute as well. The Florida statute it governs what's called restrictive covenants, which can be non-competes, non-solicitation, trade secret and confidential information, NDAs, those types of things. So a lot of that's still going to be covered under the statute, but the non-compete clauses may not be. And it's a very broad rule, and it defines non-compete clauses very broadly. There's only a few exceptions. One is that in the sale of a business, if the non-compete is in association with the sale of a business, then they're not affected by the FTC rule. And then also anybody that's under a current executive agreement, if you're an executive, like a high-level executive, and you have an agreement that's in place before the rule goes into effect in September, that agreement can still be enforced, but you cannot enter into that same agreement with that executive after September. So the non-compete area is changing, but we've got to keep up with it because that new rule just came out. There's been some legal challenges filed in the courts by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and other businesses. So it's possible that a court may put that rule on hold or stay it. So we're going to kind of wait and see. But as of now, it's an active rule, and it's going to be effective in September, and employers need to comply with it.
It's crazy. I could see both sides of it. I mean, like if I'm a person who's working, I want to be able to move freely and have, the opportunity to increase my career and further it but on the flip side, I don't want to see trade secrets, like I don't want to work, if I work for Kentucky Fried Chicken and I know the 11 herbs and spices, I don't want to be able to go to KFC, to Church's or whoever else at Popeyes and give them the recipe. I get that part of it. So the way it sounds, or maybe I'm mishearing it, is I can move between business to business as long as I'm within this range. I just can't share trade secrets when I get there. I mean, that's kind of like the honor system.
Well, a lot of it's governed by the agreement that the employer has with the employee or the independent contractor. So the written agreement is going to cover that. But, the non-compete restrictions, you can still have non-compete restrictions in Florida until the rule takes effect. But under the rule, you got to tell employees that you're no longer going to be enforcing those non-competes once the rule takes effect. But the trade secret and the non-solicitation, those are still valid. So an employee cannot leave and go to a company and take trade secrets and use them. If they do, you have the ability to go to court and shut that down. Right. Also, solicitation of customers and employees and former employees, you can restrict solicitations. The new rule, by the way, doesn't apply just to employees. It applies to what the FTC calls workers. And workers, according to the FTC, includes independent contractors and sole proprietors. So this affects non-competes with independent contractors and sole proprietors too, which are also governed by the Florida statute, if you're in Florida.
See, now you said something there that I was not aware of, and it kind of leads me into my next question about misconceptions that people run into. I was under the impression, from past experience, something that I kind of went through with somebody else, and nobody owns clients. Now, unless you're stealing a proprietary database of names, that's one thing, but nobody owns clients. So solicitation of clients, again, Georgia at the time was, listen, anybody can call anybody. If the name is readily available, if the company name is readily available in the phone book, that's how old I am, or on Google, that information is out there for someone to go after that person. You're telling me that you can, there's NDAs or employment agreements that say you cannot call these people even though it's public knowledge?
Well, no, that isn't. I'm not suggesting that's what they would say. I'd have to see the agreement, the particular agreement to interpret it. But no, what I'm saying is that, is that you can have restrictions. You can have restrictions against soliciting customers and soliciting employees. You can also have restrictions against disclosing and using trade secrets.
Right.
And in some instances, the identification of customers or specific information concerning customers can be a trade secret and can be protected.
Right. How you go about your process could be protected.
Well, yes, and details about that customer, what they order, what they like to order, potentially.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense.
But the fact that the XYZ is located at 123 Main Street, yeah, that's public knowledge. But in order to be a trade secret, it has to be not public knowledge.
Right. Yeah, and that was the whole crux of this particular instance that I'm referring to. Is it wasn't even clients, it wasn't even active clients. It was basically a prospect list, and that's what was trying to be protected, and basically was thrown out. That prospect lists aren't protected. You don't have a working relationship with these 30,000 names of people that you just pulled off a database. So that's interesting. So listen. Do you love, as an attorney, you have to love, as an employment attorney, a little bit of government oversight actually works well for you, because every time somebody in Washington or someone in Tallahassee changes a nuance to a law, it keeps you busy.
Well, I hate to admit that, but it is true. And over the course of my career, I started out in practicing law in 1992 and was in labor relations and employee relations before that. But just since I started practicing law, the Americans with Disabilities Act was enacted. The Family and Medical Leave Act was enacted. We got the new FTC rule on non-competes that is coming out. OSHA has been updated. The EEOC has issued new sex harassment and harassment regulations. So, and yes, there is a constant explosion of new requirements. It's much more complicated to compliantly employ people nowadays, and that's where we can help folks not only get compliant if they're not, or stay compliant, but address more important hiccups that may, if the government shows up or the Department of Labor is conducting an audit, you may need to hire an attorney. It may not be me, but you probably should hire an attorney. So
this is very granular. I mean, like, you are in the nuts and the bolts. You're like in the trenches of what's going on with employees and employers. What would you say is, like, garden variety, like the firm size you deal with? Is it 1 to 5 employees, 5 to 30 employees? Like, what is that, your wheelhouse? I mean, I know you said, small to medium sized businesses, but what does that look like?
Well, I mean, I think it really runs the gamut from, both at the firm and myself, from individuals, professionals, sole proprietors, small businesses with less than 10 employees, or even mom and pop type businesses, right. Medium-sized businesses, and we would consider a medium-sized business, I guess, and some of it's not only employee based, it's also what's the revenues and all that. But I think, like, I represent probably somewhere in the 50 to 200 employee range would be a small to mid-sized business, and maybe more than 200 employees you're getting to be a little larger. But, I represent national corporations. I've done that for years. I have many clients that are, large recognizable corporations that people would know, not just small businesses. And the firm also, primarily represents small business. I'm sure we have some relationships with larger businesses as well, but that's our focus because they share our values. Like, as a firm, the small to medium-sized businesses, the individuals, the professionals, they share our values. We like to work with those people. We understand what their needs. And we just have we like to be compassionate and excellent and help them through their business issues. So it's just a market we love to serve, and like to focus on. And so, I represent some big corporations, but that's, the bread and butter of what I do and what my firm does is small to mid-sized businesses, individuals, entrepreneurs, and sole proprietorships.
Well, that's the crazy thing. Like, I talk to a lot of lawyers. I speak to a lot of lawyers. I speak to a lot of doctors. I speak to a lot of realtors, these professionals. Law school teaches you how to pass the bar exam, and it teaches you, the law. But there's so many angles to go into for how you want to use that expertise in what line, whether that's marital law, estate attorneys, PI guys, med mal, like there's so many different ways to go with it, and finding that niche for what aligns with your values as a person, as a firm, all that. That's where the enjoying what you do as a business owner really comes into play. So speaking of enjoying what you do, like when you're not doing this, what do you do when you're not in the firm? Do you like to play softball? Do you like to play pickleball? Do you go skydiving? What do you do?
Well, I'm focusing on more of that. Next week, I'm going to the Keys with my son on vacation, so I'm really looking forward to that. But
deep sea fishing, or are you just going to go to the beach?
Well, we're going to do. We got some fishing planned. I got a guy taking us out one day, and we've got some other events planned as well. So I like to fish, and I like to travel to places. But I do. I'm a pretty devout yoga practitioner, and I love to walk and power walk, and I play basketball once a week, and I coach my son's soccer team, and other than that, just being with my family and friends and enjoying life.
You could have made a fortune representing Bikram in all his yoga practices. He definitely needed a lawyer to help with some of his transgressions.
Yeah. I'm Ashtanga.
So I do like yoga quite a bit because I have a bad back, but I just don't get to practice it as much. I don't get to slow down enough to clear my mind in that space, which is where I like to go, for like restore yoga is more my speed lately rather than hot yoga, which is the Bikram stuff. So as we start to wrap this up, because we're kind of coming to the end here, and you've already sort of touched on it a little bit, but what would be the one thing that if someone's listening to this and they're a business owner, or if they're a person who's thinking, hey, I want to change my career, but I feel like I'm locked up in this situation that I don't know how to get out of it, what's the one thing they need to know about working with Brick Business Law, or you specifically?
Well, I mean, I think with me specifically and with the firm, that we're really dedicated to kind of get, working with the individual and bringing everything down to the individual level. And, we have relationships with people within organizations, and we have, representation relationships with those organizations or with those businesses. So I think, basically to keep it real and to keep it, face to face and compassionate and honest. And we want to be involved in the clients' businesses. And we're also very mindful of expenses. I spend a lot of time with clients, explaining what it might cost and helping them understand. And they're not surprised by cost, because lawyers can be expensive and legal work can be expensive. And
I know.
And we try to work with clients and let them understand what's going on. And it's in a collaborative way. And I think that's, and we want to do that because that's part of our mission, to be compassionate and excellent in what we do.
So if I need your services, I'm a business owner or I'm someone looking to just need some guidance, what's the best way for our listeners to get a hold of you?
Well, the best way is to go to our website at brickbusinesslaw.com. And you can find us there, and then you'll get to meet many of my colleagues, like Scott Miller is our corporate attorney. He does a lot of corporate work. So you can see my colleagues on there, and you can see a little bit more about our mission and about what our firm's all about. And there's some blogs on there too. I've got some blogs on there with some recent developments. So that's a good place to go to get informative, updates on just the law, or you can link into those updates, as we send them out.
And if someone wants to speak to you guys, is there a way to get a hold of you via phone?
Yes, my direct line is 813-355-8360, and my firm's direct line is 813-816-1816.
So folks, if you're listening to this, and listen, I've been in this situation where you're trying to dissolve a partnership agreement, or you're trying to look for that next chapter, and you're not sure what the consequences of making that change are, and it can be very scary. It behooves you to have some sort of guidance. Maybe you don't get the full Cadillac version of firm representation, but at least having somebody in your corner to help you as you start that next venture, or you get out of the existing venture that you're in. Contact Brick Business Law. Kevin is a partner there. You can reach them at brickbusinesslaw.com, or the firm's number is 813-816-1816. Kevin, thank you so much for being a good neighbor. Thank you so much for spending some time on the Good Neighbor podcast. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciated the opportunity, and best to you.
Yeah, great to meet you. We'll talk soon, I'm sure. You have a great day.
Yes, thank you. Goodbye now.
Thanks for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Passcode. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnppasco.com. That's gnppasco.com or call 813-922-3610.